I headed into the house, checked the scrawled note under an apple magnet on the fridge. Yeah, Grandpa G was dead. According to Mrs. Malloy, who talked to the doctor, his heart had stopped while he was putting jelly on a slice of toast. He never even gotten a chance to eat it. You know, out of all the epitaphs one could have, didn't get that last taste of Smuckers has got to be the lamest.
It shows us all the places that we want to go and look. Superbook! Superbook!
Hey, it's our first returning Ghost Rider. And it's the one with the name I can't pronounce. Yes, Laura the Ghost Rider for number 27, The Exposed, and boy, could this book not be any more different from that one. While The Exposed was a helter-skelter string of action pieces with huge stakes and new additions to the Animorphs pantheon, The Conspiracy is about as small and insignificant as Animorphs ever got. And yet it's still written with the same kind of hectic, go now, move, 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 pacing as Laura's previous book. You know, at least with number 14, The Unknown, the characters were under the misconception that there was something important going on. Here we have the Animorphs equivalent of asking two girls to the same dance, but playing it totally serious. We open with Jake returning home from school to find his crying mother quickly rushing towards a taxicab. It seems that Jake's great-grandfather, whom is referred to as Grandpa G, passed away. Mom is going out to make funeral arrangements. Tom, Jake, and their father will drive up later. However, Tom doesn't take this news too well, as leaving for this funeral would require him leaving town for 4 days, and no matter which way you cut it, he won't be able to go without starving of Chondrona rays. Well, okay, there are a lot of ways you can cut this. This is the central conflict of the book, that Tom's Yeerk is desperate to find a way to get out of this trip, and that he might do harm to those around him. As far as conflicts go, it's a bit of a head-scratcher, opening up a lot of questions that just make you wonder how the Yeerk invasion functions at any kind of scale. How is an alien race supposed to conquer an entire planet when they can't get 4 days away from the Animorphs' hometown? Why is there only one Yeerk pool? Okay, I can accept that there is only one Yeerk pool at this size, sitting under a third of the city, being part pool, docking port, and strip mall. But during the original series run, I always imagined that there was 100 smaller pools littered across the world. Nothing fancy like this central pool, something more along the lines of the one seen in the Animorphs television show, just a small pool in the basement of a YMCA in Milwaukee here, one in a studio apartment in Salt Lake City there. I mean, we learned in the David trilogy that a world leader in an overseas nation is under control of the Yeerks, meaning the Yeerks have to have some kind of presence in other countries, otherwise this world leader is flying to and back from the Animorphs' hometown all the fucking time. It's just hard to imagine the Yeerks would put themselves in a situation where their cover is blown by a family road trip. If not smaller pools scattered across the country, then what about emergency kits? We saw in number 30, The Reunion, the last book, that the Yeerks have portable, one-use Chondrona machines. You'd think they'd be handing those out like candy. Of course, I brought this up to a few people in private conversations, and the main argument against these objections was number 8, The Alien, in which we learned that higher-ranking Yeerks get better treatment when it comes to shortage in Chondrona, and Tom's current Yeerk is pretty much a newsie. But that was in a time of crisis. The destruction of the Chondrona was a surprise to the Yeerks, and they hadn't formulated a proper contingency plan. This is not an emergency situation. This is a Yeerk just doing his job of being in someone's head and trying not to be suspicious. And now he's going to have to be suspicious in order to survive. This is your own goddamn fault, Yeerks. So Tom throws a fit about this trip, saying he has important obligations to the sharing, but their father won't hear any of it. Jake is secretly happy about this development. Starve, Yeerk, starve! 2 paragraphs later, starve, Yeerk, die in agony, die screaming, Yeerk. And then a page later, die, Yeerk. Jake, leader of the Animorphs, hardened by dozens of battles, has been killed and brought back to life twice, and all in the maturity of a 9-year-old. So Jake decides to take a walk to reflect on all that's been going on when he randomly runs into Marco. He tells Marco all that's been going down, and Marco rightfully points out that Jake just left a desperate alien alone with his dad. They rush back to the house to discover Tom and Dad gone. Jake searches the house for clues for where they went. I exploded, slammed against the side of the refrigerator. Bam! One of the magnets fell off. The apple, which had been holding my mother's note about Grandpa G. Only the second note, the one that had been tacked beneath it, was gone. Had someone taken it? Why, when it had the flight number and details about what to bring when we drove out? The garbage. Frantically, I grabbed the plastic can and flipped open the lid, knelt and peered inside. Lying crumpled atop the banana skins and the coffee grounds and the empty yogurt container was a wad of pink paper. Crumpled. I rose and smoothed it out on the counter. The top of the note was the one from my mother with the flight information. At the bottom of that note was my father's handwriting. Jake went to a sharing meeting with Tom to explain why he can't help them out this weekend. Be back soon. Love, Dad. Oh, God, I whispered. My father hadn't thrown away the note. Tom had. He had been covering his tracks. Covering his tracks? How? Why? What exactly does crumpling up the note explaining where Tom and Dad are accomplish? This only makes sense if Tom is aware that Jake is one of the good guys. Otherwise, all that he's accomplished is confusing the theoretically clueless Jake as to where he and Dad went. There is nothing odd in a know-your context about taking your dad to your youth group to explain why you can't fulfill your responsibilities to them. By getting rid of this note, Tom at best has mildly confused Jake for no good reason, and at worst has given Jake reason to try and look for them and possibly mess things up. I mean, getting Tom and Jake's dad infested is a good idea, but you gotta play the game, Tom. You gotta play the game. Panicked and unsure where Tom has taken his father, Jake and Marco rush to a payphone to call Eric, under the presumption that public phones are somehow less tapped than private home phones. Eric doesn't have any idea where the Yeerks are gathering, but that's when Jake remembers his father's cell phone. No, it's easy. He always carries a cell phone. I'll just call and ask him. You can't, Marco and Eric both said at the same time. Why not? I said. Jake, if you call and ask your dad where he is, and then the meeting gets broken up by us, don't you think the Yeerks will put 2 and 2 together? I don't care, I said, before I could stop myself. The sympathy on Marco's face evaporated. You're not getting me killed to save your father, he snapped. Cripes, guys, okay, calm down. While I appreciate that when they discovered that Visor 1 knew at least a few of them were human, that they're going into overtime and protecting their identities, but there is a clear line of logic here. Tom threw out the note explaining where he and Dad would be. Therefore, Jake would have no idea when he came home. So Jake, calling his father's cell phone to ask what's going on, is the clear, logical progression of this. Really, this conflict only makes sense if Tom is aware of Jake's true nature, which he isn't. So we've got a book with characters fussing over literally nothing. Eric has Jake make the call anyway, but tells him not to say anything. Instead, Eric taps into the call, records the ambient sounds, and tries to work out a location from that. I've analyzed the incoming data of the call and have narrowed it down to 4 possible locations, Eric said when I called. 4? I blurted. We didn't have time to search 4 different places. Where are they? Well, factoring in the frequency strength, the cell phone towers that were activated, and background noise such as the sound of jet engines overhead, car engines moving slowly, human footsteps, and various other sounds, our analysis suggests they're in the northern section of town, roughly between the 8,000 and the 14,000 blocks north-south, and the 600 and 1,200 blocks east-west, an area 6 blocks by 6 blocks. No! No! Bad Animorphs, bad. I will accept all the transdimensional beings and time travel and other sci-fi premises you want, but don't you ever do this primetime investigation drama, CSI, NCIS bones bullshit like this again. Only Sherlock Holmes is allowed to do this kind of thing, and he's a pimp. So Jake makes a guess, and he and Marco fly off to a strip mall on the other side of town. I'll meet you there, I said. No, wait! Marco, I'm faster than you are. Well, perhaps if you guys didn't have your little Animorphs law about only having one bird of prey morph, we wouldn't be having this kind of complications, would we? Jake and eventually Marco reach the strip mall and determine that the makeshift Yeerk meeting is in an antique store, but Marco holds Jake back from just storming in there. This is a last-minute meeting being held in secret, and if Andalite bandits were to suddenly break up the place with no apparent reason, the Yeerks might start thinking outside the box. Instead, Marco morphs Gorilla and moves some cars around, setting off some alarms and punching a giant dent in the hood of Jake's dad's car. A scene which looks nothing like this inside cover image, which is of a computer-generated gorilla messing with cars and live traffic in a place that is clearly not a strip mall. This looks like a screenshot from The Sims. Anyway, this is enough to break up the meeting, and Jake's dad is safe for the time being. And Tom needs a new way out of this. His plan B? Murder Dad. Because obviously getting thrown into prison for 40 years is so much easier to deal with than being out of town for 4 days. Hey Tom, if you're seriously at this level, where you can't come up with any other means to save your life, then why don't you just open a pack of instant maple and ginger oatmeal? Sure, it'll essentially make you a drug addict and fuse you permanently with your host body, and you'll lose control about 60% of the time, but at least you won't be dead. Well, the Animorphs figure that Jake's dad is in constant danger, so they start doing rotations and maintaining a 24-hour watch on both him and Tom. This leads to largely irrelevant hijinks involving the Animorphs following Dad to his work, where they attack a guy who looks like he's going to assault Jake's dad, but is actually just upset that he stole his parking space. Animorphs, the great sci-fi epic!